Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to a regularly scheduled meeting of the Programs and Services Committee. We are being audio and video recorded. At the moment, in the room, we have Councillor Stephen Farrell, Julia Malachy, Vice Chair of the Committee, Council President John Oliver, Councillor Lyle Baker, Councillor Martha Bixby, and I am your Chair, Josh Princeman, Ward 4 at large. Online, I see we have Councillor Brittany Hume-Charm. Welcome, Councillor Charm. I don't think Councillor Mickley is going to make it tonight, so I think that's who we have.
Is he still in space?
He is in space. For those who don't get that, go back and watch the City Council meeting from Monday night, which was also forum. No. Yeah. All right, we have two items on our agenda. I actually don't think either one is going to take very long, but let's get into it. So the first one is item 7826. This is a review of the City Council rules. As folks know, our rules call for a subcommittee to be formed to look at revisions to the rules, if and when necessary. It's something we have done in the past. It is something we did last session. I think it's a good way to handle rules reform. I also think there are sort of a limited number of things that have already been brought up. So my plan, again, the docket item calls for establishment of a subcommittee. So the members of the subcommittee who I have tapped would be Councillor Lyle Baker to chair the subcommittee, Councillor Charm. I will join as well, and President Oliver. If that is acceptable to the four of us, that will be our subcommittee for the rules. Just to orient folks, I am aware of a few rules provisions that have been referenced that people would like to undertake. I'll just mention those just so folks have some awareness of things that may come up in that. But as folks know, any and all councillors are welcome to attend any and all meetings of any and all subcommittees, including the rules subcommittee. Council representation on the financial audit committee was raised. I believe the rules say that it's automatically the chair of the finance committee.
I didn't talk to legal about that, so.
Okay. Yeah. Subject for the subcommittee. The order in which we vote as a council has been raised. Should we rotate that? Should it continue to be alphabetical, starting with A every time and ending with Councillor Wright?
With the president.
Or the president, really, yeah. Whether there should be more explicit description of certain Robert's Rules of Order in their applicability or their funding. There is a reference, I believe, to Robert's Rules of Order in the draft, the current draft, but none of the actual motions are called out in there, and so there was a thought that maybe those would be spelled out more articulately in the rules so that people can see. Auto licenses, whether we need to handle those before the land use committee the way we have been, or whether there's an alternative way to handle those, whether those could be handled within the jurisdiction of another body within the city.
We moved those to PSNT.
That was the tax.
I forget which one it is, but yeah. And the last one is composition on the committees. I have raised this before. I may raise it again. I don't know that the city is best served by having one member from each ward on every single committee, or whether there is a better way to do that. If we have, for example, two financial whizzes from Ward 6, should they both be able to serve on the finance committee? But again, all for to be brought up within the rules committee. I would say if anyone has a subject they would like brought up, best to provide a little notice to the subcommittee that you would like something addressed, and maybe prepare yourself to sort of talk about how you would like that addressed and what changes you think should be there. I would say send those suggestions maybe to Councillor Baker. You're welcome to copy me as well. Councillor Oliver.
Yeah, at the very end of last term, I think we ended up with 2 or 3 leftovers that were brought up, and I believe Councillor Malachy was the owner of 1 or 2 of those. Like literally came up at the very end, and when I summarized what we did, I did submit those in writing and said, "Hey, by the way, we should."
And I didn't just mention them.
Correct.
Okay,
They're in addition to those couple.
I'll have to look up
And I
what
can
those
go
were.
find them.
Okay, so yeah, that is not an exhaustive list. That is that was not meant to be. It was just a preview of things.
Sure.
Because I don't think we have some real heavy duty rules to undertake this time. I think this might be like one or two subcommittee meetings and bang them out. But I could be wrong.
Oh, you just said that out loud.
Let me ask you.
Baker, Princeman, Charm, Oliver.
Glad to serve as chair with such distinguished company. The question I wanted to just check is, we've tried to do that before a programs and services meeting on the theory that it's a night when we theoretically are all available. And I don't know if that timing, Councilor Charm, did that work for you? But that cuts into the dinner hour, and I just don't want to do that without checking in advance.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, we can probably handle this offline. I think if we were to do it on an irregular basis, then I think that would probably be fine. As long as we have advance notice and I can plan accordingly. The other thing that we could do, I mean, have you all typically held these meetings in person or by Zoom? If we could find another time that wasn't an evening, that was, a couple times during the day. I'm not sure how disruptive that would be for people. And we all have a lot going on. But I think, if we were to do 6:15 to 7 or something like that a couple times, then that's not, make or break.
And I think the meetings would be like this. I prefer in person, but that's just my bias. But that means people can't attend virtually. That's just as you are now. It's just a question of timing.
Mhm.
I'll try and work with the chair and make sure we've got at least the inventory of questions, and then there may be some others that people have that we ought to find out about. Okay.
Just set the first date or not?
No, not yet. I want to look at the calendar myself and figure out.
Just trying to, in order to respond to the chairs.
But they'd be the same Wednesday nights.
As a P&S meeting, yeah, that's fine. I just, on the presumption that at least we roll right into the other meeting.
All right. All right. All right. Anyone else have anything else on rules? Again, I'll try and look for those two things. I apologize.
I'll find them.
Okay. Again, everything's fair game, not exhaustive list, so not an intentional omission. All right, with that, can I get a motion to hold?
So moved.
Moved by everyone. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, it is held. Our second and final item of the evening is item 77-26. This is a review of the Newton City Charter. Now, as I just said, we've handled a bunch of things through subcommittees. I actually think this one we'll take up as a committee. Okay, and we'll meet, I don't know how many meetings it's going to take. We'll do a bunch of regular meetings as a committee, and we will take up charter reform. There are a couple of specific topics that have been raised by councilors. I know the size of the council is one that's always in there. I'll mention a bunch of the things I think we'll tackle, but folks may or may not remember that there was a charter commission 10 years ago. I note that we are joined by a number of the members of the Charter Commission. Jane France is here, and Larner is here in the room. Hello, ladies. Chris Steele is online, and Brooke Lipset is online. That's 4 of the members of the Charter Commission. Folks also know that the Charter Commission failed miserably, proposed a beautiful set of recommendations that were voted down by the people. That was exclusively the fault of the chair. It was not the fault of anyone else who participated in the Charter Commission. But I think there was a lot of support for a lot of the recommendations of the Charter Committee. Now, one piece of that was certainly the composition of the City Council, but there were a number of changes to the Charter that went into that proposal that were pretty broadly supported. And so it is my belief that we can take up a number of those things, possibly without a lot of controversy, to propose a bigger package of charter reform. The process we are most likely looking at here is home rule petition. I think folks know that there are a few ways to reform a charter. A charter commission followed by a vote of the people is one way to do that. Another way to do that is through home rule petition, which means we as a city council pass basically a version of a new charter that we want the mayor to sign, say, yes, I agree with this version of a new charter, and it gets sent up to the state legislature. And if the state legislature passes it, it becomes our new charter. Okay. There are some complications in there about which things can be taken up through which process, such as the structure of the city council. The structure of the city council, I believe when we get into that, we can talk to the city's legal department, but my belief is that that change would require a vote of the people. Now, a vote of the people can happen, after a home rule petition is sent, if the legislature approves it, sort of conditioned upon a vote of the people. That's not to stymie any of the discussion. It's just to say that if we do include restructuring of the city council, or possibly one or two other things, that a vote of the people might be necessary, whereas a home rule petition is not in and of itself need a vote of the people. Okay, folks with me so far? Councilor Baker?
I just add that for people who are new to this process, we have done home rule petitions periodically. For instance, the change of the name from Board of Aldermen to City Council was done by a home rule petition. I mean, that was in the charter. That's an example of something that probably should have gone to the voters, but didn't. But never mind.
Good example. So the way the Charter Commission did this was there are 13 articles in the city charter. You all have copies of the city charter here. Thank you, Miles, for doing that. You can look. And what the Charter Commission did was look at an article at a time. There were a couple of articles that were sort of combined and intertwined with each other, and we said, okay, we need to discuss these together. But we tried to break it down, have a couple of commissioners lead the discussion on each article, do some research, do a lot of research, work with the Collins Center from UMass, propose revisions, bring it into commission, discuss all those revisions in depth, have people come in and testify. There were public comments at every one of the commission's meetings, and then proceed forward with a revised draft. These materials are on the city's website. You can look up the work of the Charter Commission. One of my legacies is that I made sure that the Charter Commission's work stayed on the city's website for people to see. So there's a lot of good work there. Article 1, for example, we may look at being able to move definitions into Article 1. A lot of people put them up front, helps lay out what all these words mean that you're about to deal with. Article 2 is the legislative article of the charter. Things that I know people have mentioned are the date of the inauguration is specified in the charter. Some people don't like that it is January 1st at noon. Some people like it to be, as it is known, the first secular day of January. So that it is not necessarily on the 1st, it could be the 2nd, the 3rd, whatever, and you may not ruin your New Year's Eve. And certainly the composition of the city council is a major topic within that. And Councillor Farrell, I screwed up and did not put your item on the agenda for tonight, but it is certainly wrapped up within the discussion of the charter, and that's what we're talking about. So my recommendation is that we'll provide a little notice. I'll provide notice, which articles I think we're going to talk about, and then folks can do research that they want. I think it's nice of us to invite. I invited the members of the Charter Commission tonight. I think it's a great resource for us, right? I think they can come in and talk about what went into their recommendations, what were they thinking about when they made their recommendations, what research have we not talked about. I think they're sort of like expert witnesses that we can rely on. Unless anyone is strongly opposed to that, I think we should encourage their participation. But
In that regard, is it possible for you to ask them if they're willing to provide us with their emails or phone numbers so we can get in touch with them if they're willing to do that?
Members of the Charter Commission who are here, I'm seeing nod from Chris Steele. Ann Larner likes to remain heavily private. She doesn't want you to ever talk to her. Just kidding, she's nodding. Jane is nodding, and former Council President Lipset, are you okay with that as well?
Our partnership is.
She's on mute, but what I saw her say was, absolutely, Mr. Chairman, I love everything you're saying. Thank you so much. This is a wonderful thing you have done tonight.
But now she's laughing at you, so I don't know about that. It's still muted, okay. So I think the
We
answer to
will-
your
we will
question is
construe-
probably,
She'll be able to be here in 1 second.
and I do think,
Wait, I can read lips. I am sorry, I'm just trying to.
I don't know if I can do it.
you can't.
It's okay. You can show
Okay,
us.
but I think Brooke is okay with us emailing her as well.
And if you could collect her.
Sorry, I have no idea how to work this machine. I didn't hear what Counselor Farrell, forgive me, Counselor, for calling you doctor, but Counselor Farrell, I didn't hear what his suggestion was.
Question was whether the former charter commissioners were willing to make their emails available to counselors as a resource so that they could ask questions.
Of course.
Just want to ask.
Well, that was worth the wait. Okay. All right, let's go take some questions and then I'll go on if you want. But Councilor Mallon.
If we're gonna have the proponents of the charter participating in discussions with us, can we also invite and allow opponents of the charter from the Lively campaign to also be allowed to speak?
Yeah, and it wasn't necessarily like a proponent. It was like, these are the people who formulated something and did research on it, so we can have them. I don't know that we need to have everyone participating in everything. I was just trying to make them available as a resource, but anyone who wants to participate can participate. And if folks want to have a public hearing at some point, we can absolutely do that, and anyone who wants to comment can comment. Are there specific opponents other than yourself that you think should participate?
We've got Chuck Lucas on the council now,
Yeah.
Emily Norton.
Well, Tariq's welcome to participate in any meeting
I know.
because he's a counselor.
Exactly.
He's running a committee at the same time.
That's why we scheduled it this way.
I figured.
Yeah.
There was actually a collusion well before.
Yeah, but sure. I mean, anyone you think should participate,
Okay.
invite them. And obviously, everyone can email us too, you know? Yeah.
They did research too.
Let me just comment. I'm a little troubled about this item because it has pieces of it I like and pieces of it I'm concerned about, because the Charter Commission went through a whole process and the whole thing was voted down. So in effect, I think, and we've lived with that for 10 years, and I know that you worked on it so hard, and there are a number of people in the room that worked on it hard. So I'm a little troubled about sort of reviving an effort that basically was defeated. I'm not troubled by looking at some specific changes that might improve the charter that are, that we think are positive, but I would not want the public or us to think about this as another way to do the same thing by a back door. That would trouble me, because I think that is really in contravention of what the voters told us. So I know the chair is, had two goals here. One is and I think I'm fairly critical of himself, because he certainly did a lot of homework on this, and I thought, even though I didn't agree with him, I thought he did an admirable job of presenting what he presented. But that made it almost even more persuasive to me to be cautious about revisiting the matter. So I'm saying that at the outset because I might, as part of this conversation, say I would prefer to defer this item or not talk about this item, because I think that really gets into a policy, not a process. There are some things that are process, the date of the inauguration. I mean, we can certainly talk about that. That's the kind of thing we would do anyway without a wholesale review of the charter. But I think I would ask the chair to be aware of and perhaps start this process slowly with those things that are truly ministerial or policy choices that are really not at the level of what I think the Charter Commission was really intending to do, which is restructure the government in a very significant way. And that I just want to say that at the outset. And you're the chair of the committee, and you will bring forth agenda items as suits you. But I just want to make that as I think a threshold concern that I have about revisiting this way. So.
Okay, fair. Thank you. President Oliver? Bixby.
Do you want to go first? Okay. So as somebody who moved here after the Charter Commission, so I think we do have a new generation of residents, in that time, just to put that out there. But I guess my question is, and to your point, which I think makes a lot of sense, is what are there legal distinctions in terms of what can be a home rule petition and what can't? And is that perhaps a guiding principle for what you're saying, sort of the policy versus procedure in some way?
The chair can indicate his understanding.
Yeah.
My understanding is that as a matter of historical practice, the state legislature, when faced with a structural change in a government, and the question of what that constitutes is a little bit amorphous, even through a home rule petition, will say, before we vote on that, we want to hear from the electorate on that issue, whatever that issue happens to be. And where the line is drawn, I'm not entirely certain, but certainly the composition and the council or the school committee or that sort of thing, I think, or the mayor's office or things like that, terms, are in that category. Whether there are things below that level that still require a public comment or election of some sort, and I can't tell you whether it's an advisory or a binding. I just can't recall what the process is, but the legislature is very cautious about doing structural changes through home rule petitions, which and that's one reason why I think the Charter Commission went the route it did, which was to say, look, folks, we're going to be here anyway. We might as well try to wrap this all up together. But so I don't know. You can speak to that better.
I think that's accurate. I agree with everything Councilor Baker just said. I will add that yes, the restructuring of the legislative body is certainly a demarcation that I believe the legislature will require a public vote. I also don't know that it's legally required or if it's practice of the legislature, but if the legislature requires it, they're going to require it, whether it's just their preference or legally required. It sort of doesn't matter. The other thing I want to mention is that standard sort of ordinance enactment requires, the signature of the mayor, or the council can override the mayor, a veto. Not the case with a home rule petition. The home rule petition needs the affirmation of the mayor to go up to the legislature.
It has to be the council plus the mayor.
Just to add my 2 cents in here, I guess on this, if now's the time to do that, it seems to me like at least separating the conversation into those buckets would be helpful for me as a committee, and I think maybe getting a little bit more of a sense of, I don't know, law or somebody can give us some insight into what the legislature has done in previous similar home rule petitions, just so we have a guiding principle, because that would be helpful. Because I mean, some things that have caught my eye, I don't know which bucket they're in, timing of, special elections and things like that. And then for us as a committee to possibly deal with the home rule petition things in its own bucket and figure out how to talk about the other stuff.
Well, everything would have to be by home rule petition because any charter change.
Right. But I mean, the things that would require a vote, that would be in their own bucket. And yes,
I can get advice from legal on that one.
Yeah.
Just my best memory is that some of this is determined by the level of controversy that occurs at the state legislature. I mean, if somebody says, well, I really think it's terrible if we're going to change the date from January 1st to January 2nd. They might say, well, let the voters talk about it. I doubt it. But it's, who knows how they.
All right, I have Charm and then Farrell.
I'm good. Go.
You on the list up?
Sure.
Okay, Councilor Charm.
Thank you. I'm curious in the past, how frequently do we do charter reviews? So I'm hearing that there was, one that renamed the council from the Board of Aldermen to the council. Then there was a subsequent one that was in 2015. So how often is sort of considered to be appropriate, but not trying to, revisit this all and, go through a different path and seem like we're disregarding things. Would love to hear a little bit of historical perspective there, but whether from Newton or from other communities as well.
I can't tell you, in the past in Newton, it has been ad hoc. It has been, when we think there's something that needs to come up. What I can tell you is that the Charter Commission recommended and included as part of its proposal that there would be a charter review done every 10 years. And so The Charter Commission was about 10 years ago,
Mhm.
coincidentally.
And was that recommendation that it would be done through a charter commission or done through a home rule?
The Charter Commission recommended that there be a review done every year, but not necessarily a new Charter Commission, because a Charter Commission is a process laid out through state law by which you have to elect, the city elects the 9 members, and then the 9 members have 18 months to formulate a proposal, which automatically goes on the next municipal ballot. And a second alternative avenue to charter reform, the one that we may undertake here as a council, is through a home petition.
So the Charter Commission of 2015. Sorry.
Yes, as part of its new charter, that the city council, I think, would undertake a regular review of the charter every 10 years. And if any members of the Charter Commission remember it differently, or if I'm getting it wrong, set me straight, but okay.
That's helpful, thank you.
Okay. Councilor Farrell.
The date you have at the bottom of this about August 17th, is that's prescribed by some law or something?
That is not a reporting date for charter reform. That is a note to the city council. Under our rules, this item has to be heard within every item has to be heard within 6 months. So that's just, we've now fulfilled that.
Yeah. Okay.
I think, am I right?
It's more of a reminder for discussion items submitted by councilors that there's a 180-day period that there's this expectation that they be scheduled on the agenda.
So okay, thank you.
Okay.
So that doesn't require any action. That's the thing. We gotta talk.
In fact, we were really good at inaction. So,
Yeah, concern.
Councilor Maliki?
It seems surprising to me that we're so vague on what exactly needs a popular vote and what doesn't. Is it not prescribed somewhere in whether it's the state constitution or whatever governs what needs a home rule petition?
Well, it all needs a home rule petition.
Yeah.
But you mean what needs a vote of the people?
Right. What could the state legislature, and I believe also the governor's signature is needed as well, I think.
Well, the governor on any home petition has to, because the legislature
Right,
has to. the governor
Right,
has
it's treated like
Just
anything
like-
that's like this. So for some reason, Governor Healy.
But I think you might be able to get a legislative, veto override by the legislature if the governor vetoed a home petition. I don't know if the governor's
Yeah.
signature is necessary,
I
the way
thought
mayor's is.
the governor did have to sign on.
Well, the point is that I think you're making is that maybe it could be enacted by a 2/3 vote of the
Yeah.
legislature, but
Yeah, but my real question was, right, somewhere,
So,
what types of things need to go back to, or need to have already had a popular vote before they go to the legislature?
so I know the law department has done research on this. I'm speaking from my memory. But my understanding is that the law department believes that a vote of the people would be required to restructure the legislative or perhaps the school committee bodies.
Mhm.
Okay. I don't know if a vote of the people is required if we recommended changing the term length or
How to fill a vacated seat or something like that.
I certainly don't think it would be required for how to fill up a vacancy, and I don't think it would be required if term limits were, well, it might be required if term limits were imposed. But I was not 100% clear, just from my conversation, I didn't say anything right, but from my conversation, I was not 100% clear on what the legal authority was for that belief. But the law department does believe that.
Okay.
Is that fair? I
Yeah.
know Councilor
I'm
Oliver
nodding along, yeah.
has
And
done
I,
some homework on this too.
yeah, because I have to play a lot of catch up. But one of the things that, or the number one thing that I heard that kind of, I don't know, clarified a lot of the questions that I think we're going to have is the city charter is state law. So if you think about it from that perspective, it's up to the people who pass that law as to what they're going to ask Newton, I believe. Which hoops we have to go through is how I'm going to say it, but I'm not trying to be dismissive or callous about it. But there are precedents, and I think that's when when we spoke to Jonah December, whenever it was, and he ran through that presentation that he had. I'm looking at you. You were
Yes.
there, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Good.
Forgot about that. Yep.
And he expressed very similar to, obviously he used different words, but what Josh is basically saying is, yes, there are precedents. This is what the legislature has asked for in the past. It might change. They might ask for us to do more. They might ask for less. Regardless, it all requires a home rule petition. That's baseline. Because it's their law, not ours. We're asking them to change their laws that govern this city. That's why the mayor's signature is required. Again, in my head. And I think that for me, it helps me think through it from that perspective, because that helps me kind of frame then, well, okay, these are the things that are going to rise right to the top of the top of their list. We're asking them to change their laws that govern us, that we use to govern ourselves.
Sounds like they could change the rules as they go along. Or
they could ask for different things. I don't think there is a rule that says if you're going to change the number of city councilors or how long they serve or how long they can serve, I don't think there's a hard and fast rule at the state level that says, okay, now you have to go to the people. But that's what they've done in the past. At least that's how I interpreted everything.
all the law department has to go on is kind of the universe of past precedents from when other cities have changed.
I don't want to speak for the law department. I can tell you how I interpreted what the law department said. But my thinking on this was that we would delve into some of the substance, not tonight, but when we get to the substance, we can see what we're interested in doing. And if we're interested in doing something, we can get an official opinion. What would we need? What permissions would we need to do this thing? And then we can see how viable it is. But I didn't want to constrain our thinking and our creativity right off the bat by saying, here are the things you can't do because the road is just too long.
And the road does get pretty long if we have to put it on the ballot, get it voted, and then, because you're literally talking at least a 2-term, over the course of 2 terms of our terms.
And,
It would be into the second term, put it that way.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Well, I just want to point out that where there are situations that are time sensitive, so as when Mayor Mann died, for example, we had a home rule petition to set a special election at a different time than the charter called for. Because he died so early in his office, there was an acting mayor situation, and people felt this was not a good idea. We should get something done sooner. The legislature acted on that very quickly. But other things would take more time. My only request is that this is an issue that, because of its historical nature and the potential change involved, personally, I would like to be present for all those meetings. I'm going to be out of town a little bit in March and other places, so I hope that we can talk about scheduling.
We're going to be doing this in March.
I figured.
No, absolutely. All right, let me just.
And if I may, just one other thought that I wanted to put out there. I would like however we define the process or the way forward or whatever, however we're going to tackle this. One of the things that I certainly want to lean in on the previous Charter Commission members to help us here is this is what they did. This is how this is the research we conducted. Here are the recommendations we made. Now those recommendations ultimately were not adopted, I believe in whole, I think. So I agree with Councilors Maliki and Baker, because I think together what they're really saying is, well, okay, that body of work, we need to understand how it came about, what it ended up in, obviously, right? And that's downloadable from the city's website, thanks to the heroic efforts of Councilor Krinsman. And I think beyond that, we need to then say, okay, so tried it, didn't love it 10 years ago. What do we want to then modify and bring forward, and then I believe and how do we what are the different pieces that go through different processes based on legal's best advice to get it approved? You know what I
Yes,
mean? Like,
yes, the
do
only
we break it
thing
into
I
two
would add-
pieces or whatever?
The only thing I would add is that by law, the charter commission process results in as many recommendations, a whole new charter, everything you want to do in one single yes or no vote. Okay, so it was not that the people of Newton were presented with a list of, 150 changes that were recommended by the charter change, and they voted no on all of them, or they voted yes on 75 of them and no on.
There was one vote,
There,
one omnibus.
there was
thing.
a predominant issue, which was the structure of the city council, which is one out of many, many proposed revisions to the charter
Interesting.
that really dominated, I mean, appropriately so, but it dominated the conversation, campaign, everything, and was voted down. I think if you look at a lot of the debate and a lot of the things that were said and things that were written, there was a lot of praise for a lot of the work of the Charter Commission, save for this one issue, which again, people thought should, take the whole thing. But, and I mean, maybe I'm just trying to throw myself a bone here, but I think I'm saying that we can look at a lot of that other stuff without thinking that it was necessarily disliked by the people. I think we can look at that other stuff fresh. I think the structure of the city council, one could conclude that the people did not support the structure of the city council that the Charter Commission proposed. I think the other things that the Charter Commission proposed should not be viewed in a similar light. And again, we can change our mind on any of that stuff. But
Just to your own point, though, and correct me if I'm wrong, there might have been a lot of the equivalent of straw votes along the way.
Mm-hmm.
Probably not straw votes, but the equivalent thereof, where, because it does seem to me like you literally just said they only had a choice, yes to all of it or no to all of it.
Right.
We don't know what people were saying yes or no to specifically,
right.
Although to your point, the big, the elephant in the room, right, that a lot of people were looking at was composition of the council. So I totally get that point, but I don't want to assume, or please don't ask us to assume that all the other minor pieces were good to go as is. I don't know if we have that evidence, but maybe it's there. I'll just plead ignorance on that.
I think we're sort of saying the same thing.
Okay.
Well, slightly. I'm saying we can introduce them and we can see how people feel. And we don't have to presume that people like them or dislike them.
Fair enough.
I have one other process.
Let me just come to Councilor Farrell. I'll come back to you, okay?
And then you're
Councilor
gonna
Farrell.
Just
hand
given
You're
that
gonna hand
we were talking about looking at the chart, is there any requirement that we notify the school committee that we're going to be looking at this, even if we say we're not going to do anything about the school committee? And the same about administration. We ask them to be part of this, or is that only when it comes to an issue that's directly relating to our interaction with the administration?
I think it's prudent. I don't think it's a requirement, but I think it's prudent. Yeah.
And I will, the administration is very well aware that we're having this conversation, as you might imagine, as is the school committee. They saw it.
I had this conversation with the mayor a year ago.
There you go.
So,
Councilor Charm.
Yes, thanks. So two questions after listening to this. So just in reaction to that last point, do we know if there are things that the school committee and the mayor, might say, like, please add this to the laundry list of things that you're going to be reviewing? I mean, it may be that there, are a set of things that, the school committee, for example, would love to have changed. So I would say not only do we, is it prudent to be involving them, but also to be, maybe getting their input. So that may not be a question, but that's maybe more of a point. And then on the other one, the other question that I have is, I'm just hearing, of course, I had heard how much time has went into this charter commission back in 2015. 18 months, 9 people, deep diving. This could take a lot of time. And so I am curious, given that we are a committee that has other things that also need to be handled, how, do we want to be time boxing this? Do we want to be, saying we're going to tackle, in terms of like a deadline of delivering something? Do we want to be, picking up a piece of this at every meeting? Like, how will we try to manage what could be a, a very exhaustive process?
A really good question. Appreciate the question. It's actually the foundation for the reason why I'm sort of proposing what I'm proposing, which is I don't think we have the capability, the resources, the time, or the inclination to do a fresh look at everything, which is what would really be required if we wanted to sort of start from ground zero with the things that have been brought up, at least to me, that would require charter reform. It is explicitly why I'm saying if we want to look at the charter, which I think we do, but folks can tell me if they're wrong. I know we have a couple docket items that certainly require it. We have the resource at our disposal of a review of the Newton City Charter, which is unique. Okay, it is not just a copy and paste from Methuen with find and replace Methuen and put Newton. It is a unique city charter. We have an article on the neighborhood area councils. We have a whole article on comprehensive plans. We have an article on financial procedures. Like it's a unique city charter, as many of them are, but ours is unique. And we also have the benefit of a comprehensive review of that charter with proposals that have been set forward. Again, we can look at any of those proposals and say, this doesn't make sense. That's fine, but I think it would be a disservice to ourselves to not at least look at that, utilize that research that had been done and say this does or doesn't make sense. Let's proceed from there. Does that make sense? And that's the way I think that we, whether it's handling 1 or 2 articles at a meeting, can meet maybe once a month, include this on an agenda and try and, tackle some proposed revisions and see if we can come up with a proposal after a year. You all set, Councilor Term? Yeah. Councilor Mayor?
Sure. Yeah, I'm curious if people have thoughts on this besides our, our chair.
I have some thoughts on it. I just want to add at the beginning, surprise. I think the point you're raising, which is that this can be a very time-consuming exercise. And the problem is that we have other things that we're going to be dealing with in this committee that are operational and actionable. This is a charter that did not pass. The city has functioned pretty well in the meantime, or people may disagree about that, but at least that's my view.
And we're here.
And we're here.
That's exactly
I don't know.
Some people think so, some don't, right?
So, it seems to me that there's no necessity to do this. And the only question that, and I would certainly recommend a triage so that those issues that, like the structure of the city council and so forth, not be the part of the conversation. If there are things that really do think might make the city government work better than it does now, that as part of this, that can be brought forward because they were part of the charter and should not, in the judgment of the committee, disappear into because they fail. That's one thing, but I'm really loath to sort of revisit the work of the Charter Commission. I lived through that process. You lived through it because you chaired it. I lived through it as a member of the council and the public observing it all and participating in all those meetings. And I don't want to do that again. I think that the problem is that if there are selective reforms that still are viable and make sense, that we can look at those. But I don't think going through the whole Charter Commission review is a worthwhile exercise. And we have a docket item, and And the chair has the discretion to put things on the agenda and then we can discuss them. But I just want to say that I don't think it's a wise use of the time we have to go back and revisit this because I don't see an urgency about it. And that part of why I'm cautious about it. Things like the rules changes, things that emerge from the Charter Commission that are in the equivalent level, I think, are fine to look at. Date of the inauguration, that's something we can do anytime without a Charter Commission commentary. So I want to be very cautious about where we go with this because it can be a month, once a month time sink of an extreme amount for very little benefit as far as I'm concerned in terms of what we get done, and especially in terms of the opportunity cost of all the other things we've got to spend our limited time on. But there's one feature about this that I don't think anybody disagrees with, which is whatever city council we have, we are part-time people and have other lives and other responsibilities. If we were full-time people, there would be a different conversation perhaps, but I want to be very sparing about where I spend my time if I can have any choice in it. So I just want to say that as an unsurprising comment, I suspect, Chair.
Councilor Farrell.
With great respect for everything you said, Councilor Baker, I think this will take time. I am interested in learning more about options to the way we are structured. And I think, as you just said, one of the things that I think is worthwhile having a conversation about is whether this should be a part-time or full-time job. Part of the conversation. Why not have it? There are other pieces that I think probably wouldn't require as much conversation, but I think that the way we function and how we function, and the fact that we have a responsibility to cover a lot of ground, might make it worthwhile just to have the conversation about whether we continue in the way we are with as many people as we have, and whether it be part-time or full-time. There are other pieces of this too that I'm also strongly interested in having the conversation about. But
I recognize it, and I seem to recall some of those pieces. I would just point out that if my memory is accurate, some of those pieces, other people will have very interesting alternative perspectives.
I'm sure they will.
To the conversation.
That's right. That's why it's called the conversation.
Yeah. I don't want to be so elliptical about it. It's just the question of the division of authority between mayor and council is one issue that is very challenging in this whole exercise because of home competition.
That may not be a very long conversation as far as my perspective on that, the relationship between the council and the administration, but there are one or two pieces that I think are worth talking about.
I fully recognize that. I'm just putting out sort of responding to Councilor Charm's point about time management.
Well, that's one of the reasons I guess I would even want to talk about, is there a special group that would like to spend more time than less time really looking at that and then reporting back to the committee on a regular basis about how that happens. I mean, I'm more than prepared to spend a bunch of time on this because I think I've been talking about this for the past couple of years. And I haven't had the conversation with the mayor when he wasn't mayor. One of the things, I guess, along this line I'd like to be clear about is that you say, Councilor Oliver, that the administration is talking about this. And if they are, when do those conversations begin to influence about what we're doing so that we can take those into effect or into account? So if they're talking about things that they don't want to see happen, we probably should know that.
I agree with you. It's why I think I wanted to mention, at least as part of this process, the requirement for the mayor's signature. The Charter Commission did not require mayor's approval. Okay. I believe Councilor Baker chaired a subcommittee of charter reform a few years ago that ultimately made some recommendations for a home rule that was vetoed by the mayor. You get to that point, it ends. So to answer your question, I think the mayor has to be well aware of what we're doing. I think the mayor's agreement or lack of agreement is a huge factor. It's not dispositive, but it's a huge factor in what we would ultimately do or recommend.
And I would just like to say that I would hope that this process would be thoroughly collegial. I'm not interested in getting battles with people. I just want to talk about some ideas and see what people think about options.
I agree. Councilor Baker would be nicer. This would be great.
And I would say that I will testify, I hope that, and the chair will agree, that we're collegially disagreeing.
I'm
Yeah,
100%.
and that's, I feel that same way about administration.
100%. Councilor Bixby.
With respect to your role as chair, and you maybe already have a plan, so I don't want to jump ahead, but I mean, it seems as we're talking about these three, there's sort of three buckets. There's the super procedural date of inauguration, kind of, I'm like bringing the school committee responsibilities in line with state law, just briefly reviewing the recommendations from the charter. There's some stuff that kind of really needs to be discussed and addressed in a somewhat simple way. There's a few things that might be in a little bit more ambiguous bucket, like the dates of, requirements for replacing vacancies. There might be some other things. And then there's things like term limits, size of council, structural. I don't know if it would be, because there's a lot of conversation in the city as a whole. There are members of the city council who really want to have some of these deep conversations about the last bucket. And we really probably owe it to ourselves and the city to deal with the first bucket as cleanly as possible in some ways, right? Get those things done. Perhaps middle bucket too, especially the special election question. So I don't know how is there some kind of way we could kind of sequence these or timeline them or have some smaller group discuss some of them or something like that, so that we can have the time used most effectively, not preclude the first bucket by dealing with these gigantic questions, which could have the potential to derail everything, but also should be addressed.
So I'm happy to give my answer, which is, what I would say is that the Charter Commission wrestled with the exact same question and the same concepts, right? The Charter Commission knew there was this big elephant out there. There was the structure of the city council. We got to get to that, but we have this whole charter. How can we do that? What the Charter Commission decided was that the best way to go through this was one article at a time. While that they were doing that, there were components of an article that you would say, this question from Article 4, we need to shelve. We need to answer that when we get to Article 3 and Article 2 and have a whole discussion of all three of them together, because there are some things that overlap. But largely, let's go through them one article at a time, see if there are things we all just agree on, and table some other questions for later in a big conversation. And that was the mechanism through which we did get through all of the articles. I will read you my list of things that I thought we could discuss, and I think you'll see that some of them are probably pretty easily agreed upon, and there are others that it's like, no, that's a big conversation. We need to talk about whether we even want to have that conversation. But I think we need to do that as a committee. Let me come to President.
Great, thank you. So in no particular order, completely agree with what you're saying, Councilor Farrell, when it comes to understanding areas that might end up being a no-go zone for the administration. If our mayor looks at something and says, if you include this, I shall veto it, we have to then make a decision. Do we want to chase this or do we want to let it go, right? Or do we bundle it with some other thing? Like, we have options, I guess is what I'm saying. Councilor Charm, a minute ago, asked a question about, how often do we do these things? How often do we pursue it? What's the cadence? Well, our previous mayor kind of made it pretty clear, like, just don't. Like, I'm not going to, let's not spend our time there. I'm not trying to put words in her mouth. But my understanding is we just said, look, this mayor isn't going to entertain home rule petition for charter change. Next. And we moved on. I think it's fair also to say, I agree with what I'm probably gonna end up agreeing with some of what Councilor Baker is saying and some of what Councilor Princeman is saying. There are probably some things in there, like for example, if there are places where our charter is what? Contains content that is no longer in sync with current state law. I don't even know how that's possible. This is state law. So fine, great, yeah, change that, fix that. Actually, it's not even a change, it's a fix, right? It's a fix the glitch scenario in my book. And then there are varying degrees of items that are gonna be contentious. There won't be unanimity of opinion on them. Might be everything else, I don't know, we'll find out. I do like the idea of having the conversation, but it is kind of curious, like everything, the way you're setting this up, like, hey, you know, we bundled everything together in 2016, 17, somewhere, right? And it didn't pass. Well, and if the big item on the that everybody was voting on was the composition of the council, well, then maybe we shouldn't be looking at that the way it was put forward at all, because we're saying that's what people voted on. The other stuff, maybe so. I don't know the answer to that question, but to me, there are two ways to kind of read that, right? It's well, they voted no on that, so let's not do that again. But be aware of how we got there. And I do, it's also possible, right, that we vote this down. We could vote this no right now. I don't think that's going to happen, but we could vote that item. Right, the 8 of us could vote on this and say, "Yep, no, just not going to do charter reform at all." I don't necessarily agree with that approach, but there you go.
Councilor Oliver has moved disapproval. Sorry.
Councilor Oliver is now leaving the room. I'll just let it go.
Okay, Councilor Baker.
Well, I would move disapproval if I had thought I had hopes, but I don't think I do, so I'm not going to do it. But I do think I would make a suggestion again about process. Going through it the way the Charter Commission went through it seems to me to try and revisit the whole process of the charter reform the way it did, and it didn't work. And what I would recommend is sort of a version of Councilor Bixby's idea, which is that we might take a look at those things that seem relatively, if I could put it, ministerial. And there might be more than one home rule petition. There's some things you could clean up, and you might say, okay, this is the first round, we'll take care of this, we'll get these things cleaned up, and then we'll go to the second round. But to go through it in the way that the Charter Commission did, I think is not going to be productive. While they're resources, they're a resource for us and have the availability of their history and all of that, I would prefer the chair, frankly, to exercise if you're going to keep it in the committee. And I think that there's probably wise, unless you want to send some of the really minor stuff to the rules committee, in which case we can still do it with the subcommittee. But to try and do some triage along the lines that Councilor Bixby recommended, and then dispose of those things and build a little bit of a record of success of the committee and the council, and then say, okay, now we happen to eat this piece of the apple, let's try another piece and see where we go. But I don't think I would recommend going through it article by article. That's just going to be, first place, that's a very long, tedious process. And this is a commission that did that and did nothing else but that. We've got a whole bunch of other things to do, notwithstanding the fact we might have to be full-time someday. But right now, we're still part-time. That's my
question on that very point. Is it possible to do pieces and put that out for approval in whatever form? I'm just saying this is stage 1, stage 2. We're going to be coming back. There are some things
we've done that all along in our history.
Okay, so then that's a great idea.
It's possible. I'm going to say I don't recommend that because this single document has pieces that play off of each other.
I understand.
Okay. But what I also want to say is that I know I'm saying article by article, but I think within each article, there are sort of the layups, and maybe only in 3 of the articles are there more complicated issues. So I don't think it's going to be as complicated as you guys think. I think here, let me just very quickly.
Okay, to do that.
Yeah.
is the notion that that we might be able to do separate pieces and get them out, as opposed to coming up with one document, all of the things we want, that goes for a single vote.
Counselor Baker will tell you that he is an expert at creating a parens 1, a parens 2, and separating out things.
Great.
So if we as a council want to do that, or we as a committee want to do that, absolutely. There's nothing that stops us from doing that.
That's great.
Okay, I don't think we need to do it to overcomplicate this right out of the gate, because I really think it's possible that we get to some of the more complicated topics and say, we don't want to do this. We don't even want to make a proposed change here. We as a city council think that component of the charter is working just fine. It was the elephant, we discussed it, we're gonna let the elephant lie.
What's what you, if I may ask clarification, what you're saying, we as a committee
Correct.
can decide that we won't want to do it, we will
Correct.
propose that to council. We're not making the decisions for the entire council.
We as a committee,
Recommendations.
we as a committee are going to have to propose
Right.
charter reform, whether it's one document, 2 documents, 3 series of proposals to send to the council, which will have to affirm or disapprove.
Just want to be careful about
If
language.
I can clarify, and I hope that I'm hearing, I think there is some sense that the first order of triage is here. In other words,
Right.
that if there isn't sentiment on the committee to do something, there's unlikely to be sentiment on the council as a whole. That's all. I agree.
I think that's right.
And that's just,
Okay, so for example, I talked about Article 2, which is the city council article. Article 3 is the executive branch. Okay, it's another article where you have the inauguration date in there. You have the possibility of a recall provision. We don't have any recall in our city charter. You can't recall an elected official. As you've probably seen, many cities and towns do have a recall provision. The Charter Commission discussed that. We didn't end up recommending one. I'm just saying that would be the place to do it. Some people think that a city councilor and a school committee term is too short for a recall. And there's sort of never been a need for a recall on the mayor, but the mayor's term is a little bit longer if folks wanted to talk about that. The executive article also specifically articulates that there is a citizens assistance officer in the executive department. There's a question about whether either the charter should specifically call out a position in the executive department, and if it does, should it be that position? Should it be a chief administrative officer, which is what the Charter Commission recommended? Is the citizens assistance officer something we absolutely feel is needed? These are questions, right? Or should we remove that altogether and say the mayor gets to decide? And with that, I would segue into Article 5, which talks about the budget procedures and the powers of the, let me segue into Article 6, which is reorganization plans. It's a whole article on reorganization plans. Right now, Article 6 allows the city council to propose a reorganization of the government. I will tell you that the Charter Commission said that doesn't make sense. Cities across the state aren't doing that anymore. It's the executive department. Let the mayor propose it if the mayor wants to reorg. And there's a process for us to vote, approve it, or reject it. But the Charter Commission said that's not the business of the city council. Take that out. Okay? Throw that out there. Do we want the mayor to have to more regularly update the city council on revenues? Okay. For example, the Charter Commission proposed biannual updates on the revenues of the city to the city council, as opposed to just sort of waiting and hearing, as we get ready to do the budget, what do things look like? Throw that out there. Lastly, I want to mention vacancies, because this is another topic that has come up. How do we handle temporary or permanent vacancies, both in the office of the mayor, in the office of city council, in the office of the school committee? What creates a vacancy? Okay. My good friend, Councilor Mickley, moved. I believe he did nothing wrong and he followed the charter. In fact, I know he followed the charter. But some people thought we ought to look at the charter. This is not at all a comment on him. It is a question of, do we like the rules? Do we want to revisit the rules? Okay, because some people have asked to revisit those rules. So what creates a vacancy in the office? The charter is where that is found. Again, the answer to any and all these questions may be no. But these are the questions that I'm hearing people ask, and charter reform would be the way to answer those questions. Article 5 of the charter lays out budget procedures. I know some people have been interested in whether it is possible to enhance the powers of the city council when it comes to the budget process. This is where we answer that question. Okay. Should there be separate counsel, as in attorneys, for the city council? This is also the place where the Charter Commission answered that question. Okay. That question, answered in the affirmative by the Charter Commission, also served as the basis for a veto from the mayor on a previous version of charter reform. Okay. Should there be a capital inventory? There's a capital improvement plan. Should there be a regular distribution of the capital inventory? Should the city say these are the things that are currently under control of the city? Okay. Article 7 actually is all about the powers of the planning board and the comprehensive plan. Do we want to change those? And recodification. I know someone cares about recodification.
Someday it'll happen.
And someday it'll happen. Okay. Article 11 talks about recodification, and it is also where the Charter Commission put in regular charter review. Not necessarily form, not necessarily change, but review. Let's take a look at this. So those are some of the things we can talk about. Again, some of those I think are quicker discussions than others, but those are some of the topics that would require charter reform, and why I think it's worth at least looking at the whole document, methodically, and seeing if we want to make some changes. Councilor Baker.
Okay, so here's where I disagree on the process a bit, because there are things like vacancies where I think there is a gap in the charter now, and the Charter Commission identified that, and I think that's something that probably could be fixed and should be fixed, just because there's a problem waiting to happen. Whether we have a reorganization power and initiate it in the council is, to me, in a cleaned up charter, that would be fine, but I'm not sure that's worth. The city is not going to be in peril because the city council is in a position to recommend a reorganization. As part of a charter reform where you're trying to produce a clean document, then I understand that's what went on, and that was fine. But for our time, I would want to concentrate not on those kinds of issues, but the issues that look like they are a gap in the system that we need to remedy. Or there's a situation where there's a question of the distribution of power between the mayor and the exec and the city council. And again, I think the mayor is unlikely to agree to those, so they may take them off the table. But that's why I would want to be sparing about our time. Even something that the Charter Commission thought was a good idea, like whether we have a reporting requirement, on the budget, that might be a good idea. But the city has survived without it, and it's not a matter to me that seems a measure, and that's why the Charter. I don't want to revive everything that the Charter Commission did just because that's the process they used. So that's why I want to be. I kind of keep coming back to what I think Councilor Bixby's arguing, which is figure out those things that are kind of everybody would agree are a good idea to do now because there's a gap in the system. Let's fix it if we can. Then there's some things that might be desirable, but they're not necessary. We can think about those as a separate thing. And then there's the big issues of structure and so forth, and we might decide not to take those up at all. But that's why I'm asking the chair to think about the process he wants to go forward so we can have a little victory to show for the trouble.
Fair enough. Anyone else? Any other comments? I would recommend we hold, and I will come back and let you guys know what I think the next subject we can delve into is. Or if you want to discuss the process, if you want to take a vote, whether we go, article by article or whether we screw it up, you guys can take that vote.
I think listen to it. Yeah, I'm willing to let the chair take this under.
So I do think that I appreciate where Councilor Farrell is coming from on this one. It does seem to me like perhaps, and I don't know where this would come from, but I do think that maybe a logical first step might be, here's what we think the roadmap looks like. I'm not quite sure that's what you mean to be the next step. Like the next time we talk about this particular item, that is charter review, hey, let's look at how we're going to tackle life, how we're going to eat the elephant. That might be very helpful because it would what I'm hearing tonight are a lot of questions about, well, how and when, and, why would we chase something we know the mayor hates, and, things like that.
That's fair. Why don't I propose a schedule of when we can take up articles with particular topics and give you guys that to sort of respond to and see if there are other topics you want to take on or take off of that list. And we can talk about that in our next meeting.
I would sequence them in time as well as order. I mean, maybe you're doing that anyway, but suppose, for example, if we talk about filling vacancies, that would be a different track. That wouldn't start with Article 1, that would start with a different article.
Right.
And you'd say, all right, we want to try that first, then we go to something else,
Yeah.
You've heard our comments, and I think I would trust the chair's judgment to try and figure out how to.
It doesn't sound like you trust the chair's judgment, but nonetheless, the point.
You didn't say, I said trust the chair, not your judgment.
Yeah, maybe that's better way.
Perhaps a
man of
distinction with the
answerable
difference.
character and occasional misjudgment.
Yeah.
No, that's right.
Councilor Charm, I apologize, didn't see it.
No problem. So I look forward to what you put forward, Chair. I think one question that I have is maybe also a little bit procedural, but it occurs to me that this is a topic that will require a lot of us to do our homework and sort of come to opinions on a long list of things separately, and then maybe bring them together. It feels like the way that I would normally do this, that it would not be in city council, would be maybe for us to, I would love to see, what's the laundry list of the 150 things. I would go through and give a quick, okay, using Councilor Bixby's approach, maybe modified by Councilor Baker's approach, what are the ones that are obvious gaps, plug the hole in the bucket, or, procedural, that sort of, call it green, yellow, red. Maybe it's a different rating scale, something like that. And maybe we each do those things, run the list, and then see how similar our lists are. And almost have it be a little bit of a sense of okay, we are actually in violent agreement that a lot of these topics are falling into the green, yellow, red, or whatever it might be. And again, this does not need to be the process. I'm just saying normally I would think about us sort of having a bit of homework, coming to our own personal opinions on things, but using a similar set of a similar rubric or set of criteria or something like that. And then maybe bringing those together and sort of showing the results in committee, and then us saying, okay, well, now what do we think about next steps? Just to try to, what is the ability of us to use technology and our own solo time to try to expedite this and to find better ways of doing it. But where does that kind of butt up against open meeting law?
I'm not sure I'm understanding your proposal, but I would love it if everyone did their homework, right, and read through the charter and came up with what they want to propose, what they think is a layout to change, what they think is not. Listen, this has been the charter, with the exception of Councilor Alderman, a couple of things, for 50 years. So I'm not here to tell you that there is something so urgent in here that we can't survive without it. Okay, to Councilor Baker's point, none of this is. Otherwise, there would have been some call for, there would be lawsuits over our charter. There are not. So this has been the case for a while. The question is, do we want to change anything? Do we think there's anything that needs to change? Yes, state law with the charge of what school committees do has changed. The school committee, I believe, is acting largely on what the state law is, but shouldn't our charter really read what it actually does? Yes, I would argue it should, but we can tackle that and we can modify that. I think if everyone does their homework, if I lay out for everyone a schedule, here are the things, here are the topics we would like to tackle. This topic is in this article, we would like to tackle this at this meeting. I think it enables folks to do their homework, to come back and say, well, I know Article 5 is on the agenda for the second meeting in April. This, I think, is a green. This is a yellow from Article 5, and the only things I think we should discuss, nothing else. then we can have that discussion. But I think we need to do it in committee. We can't really, email a document back and forth and say, yes, no, that would certainly subvert the open meeting law. I will take it on me as homework to give you all a document to react to. But that's not to say that, anyone can't propose their own document or create a document on their own. I'm just trying to, I'm very familiar with this subject matter, so I'm trying to present it in a way that makes the most sense. Councilor Bain.
Actually, Chair's going to be astonished that I'm going to agree with him. But your point, Councilor Charm, is a wise one. But I think that what we're trying to do is to figure out what's the most economic way of doing the things that need to be done and not be consumed with the things that don't need to be done but might be nice to be done. And that's the problem we have. We're trying to make some way of doing a triage of the things that should be done and can be done and get those taken care of and then work our way forward. And so I think giving the chair the benefit of all of this conversation, and he understands all of this, and to try and produce a schedule that we can react to, I think is probably going to be the most efficient way to do it. Because we might say, let's just not deal with the question of X, Y, Z at all, even though it's not controversial, it just takes time, and we don't have the time.
I mean, the other benefit, kudos to you all, but the other benefit of having a schedule that, even if it's a year long, whatever it is, that then enables one of the comments from earlier to reach out to folks interested, for example, in school committee and say, here's when it's going to be discussed. Here's when you have, time to do your homework. Please come in and talk to us, email us your thoughts, whatever it is, right? And get all the feedback that I think appropriately members of this committee want. Councilor Baker.
And my apologies, I have to go to a sports pickup, so I will transition to Zoom. But I actually think that what you're saying makes a lot of sense, combined with sort of our different pieces added on, which is, we know what articles are coming up. We can triage on our own in our heads and decide, what's worth the conversation. And I did just want to clarify, I think from my perspective, what I was thinking about was less the kind of nice to have things and more what would be potential derailing items, which isn't the right way to think about it, because I want to tackle those. I want to find the way to tackle them that they can get the right attention, and so I think that's still the outstanding question in my head, like a parking lot in some ways, so that we can then tackle those in a way that does them justice, but recognize that they might not be the things that we can get done in a reasonable manner here. So I think if we know what's coming, we can keep both the kind of, are there changes that would just truly be lovely, but none of us really think are worthwhile? Are there things that might be, deserve their own tackling in their own way? And we know what our articles are coming out. Makes a lot of sense to me.
I would just ask you to come back in an April meeting. That's all.
Well, we'll get the schedule in a moment, but did you have something else? Okay. Then what I will say is that in terms of schedule, Councilor Lucas informed me that the night of our next meeting, when Councilor Lucas's next meeting is, they're going to be handling ICE and a bunch of immigration issues, and thought that a lot of councilors might have interest in that. I know I do. So I'm actually interested perhaps in canceling our next meeting so that folks can attend that. How do folks feel about that? Okay. Sorry, back to the discussion. Yes.
One can continue to do one's own research on any one of these issues.
And one should. And again, it's why I said not to be necessarily persuasive, but as research, look at the Charter Commission's stuff on the website, because it'll help fill you in on some of the research. I mean, it's pretty extensive what's in there. Again, not just, here's what the Charter Commission said, but here's the memo that went into it. Here were the other opinions. Here were the opinions that didn't prevail, and maybe is the opinion you think is great.
It's good stuff.
Any other points? Okay. Do you want to make a motion here or?
Sure. Motion to hold.
Oh, he's come around. Councilor Baker's moved hold. Any discussion on that? All right, all those in favor of hold, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, we're unanimous. Thank you, everyone.